Hello lovely people, I'm Sarah the Skeptical Witch. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel today. I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. Today I am going to do a video all about altars. So basically what an altar is, what it can be used for, some things that you might want to include on it, and just some ideas of how to make it kind of effective for you specifically, and to move beyond that basic Wiccan model that a lot of altars are based on. This is a video that hopefully will be good for beginners, people who are just setting up their altars, or to provide inspiration for people who are more advanced in their witchcraft practice or paganism or whatever it may be. Hopefully this video will be able to provide some inspiration for you as well. I'm going to be changing up my altar today, so I thought it would be a really great opportunity to kind of take you guys along and show you not only what that looks like, but more of an idea of some of the things that I use on my altar, and some things that you can use on yours as well to make it more personal and kind of more effective in that sense. I generally like to change my altar up with every season, but also I'm planning on changing it up a little to make it a little more like cat friendly, because my cat Freya just gets into everything on this altar and she's destroyed quite a bit of it. So yeah, I basically need to figure out something that will work with having a cat who is not going to stay off of it. I'm going to provide a quick overview of just some basics about witchcraft and pagan altars. A lot of the kind of basic information that I'm using is coming from this book. So this is Neo-Pagan Sacred Art and Altars, Making Things Whole by Sabina Magliocco. She is an anthropologist and she studied witchcraft and pagans in America for quite a while now, and I like her work. I really enjoy her work, so this is a really good book on just kind of the basics of pagan art and altars being kind of a main part of that. My other information about altars comes from other research that I've done on them, as well as just my own experiences being a witch and having had kind of multiple altars, multiple different forms of altars over the years. So what I've learned from that, I just want to share with you guys. So witchcraft and pagan altars can be used for a variety of purposes. So this could be anything like spell work as a center for ritual. They can be used for deity worship, the worship of other spirits. They can be used for ancestor veneration, anything like that. Kind of sky is the limit, honestly, when it comes to altars and what you can use them for. An altar also doesn't just have to be called an altar. I know that some people don't really like to use this term because they associate altar with some kind of deity worship, and there are some pagans and witches who don't do that, especially atheist pagans and witches. Atheo-pagans in particular call an altar a focus instead of an altar because it's kind of the focus of their attention. You can also just call it a sacred space if you want to, or a table that you keep candles on. Whatever you want to call it, it doesn't really matter. The form that an altar takes can be completely flexible and up to you. So you can have just like a regular kind of altar that is always around, like mine. You can also have a traveling altar that you would kind of pack up and take places with you. You can have altars that don't even really look like altars at all. So like you can just have a candle and like a crystal or something, or a candle and some incense, whatever you want. It doesn't have to look like kind of a grand altar or anything. And these kind of more simple altars that don't necessarily even look like altars can be really helpful if you're in the like witchy broom closet, or if you don't have a lot of room in your house. So overall, altars can be really versatile and adaptable to whatever your living situation is. While a lot of pagans and witches do center their altars specifically around deities and different forms of deity worship, you don't have to have this as a part of your altar. Your altar can have absolutely nothing to do with deities, nothing to do with worship or spirits or anything like that. So you can be a complete atheist and still have an altar, and that's totally fine. So you really don't have to follow any kind of given format, any kind of traditional style when it comes to your altar. You can do you and really make it as simple as you want, as elaborate as you want. Whatever you want it to be is what it can be. When it comes to the question of what an altar is, there really isn't just one kind of simple answer for this. There's multiple things that an altar can be. For one, it can be an artistic representation of the world as it's filtered through your consciousness. It can be an outer expression of your inner reality. It can be a tangible expression of the sacred and your relationship to that. It can also just serve as a reminder of your incredible power as a witch. I think personally that the physical reality of an altar is what makes it really powerful and really important and really great to incorporate into our practices. I think that in a lot of religions, there's a tendency to see a really harsh split between the physical and the spiritual, and it's difficult for a lot of religions to kind of reconcile that. Paganism, on the other hand, doesn't really have this harsh split, and this is one of the reasons why I find myself really attracted to paganism, is because it is a very corporeal spirituality. It's very much about the immanent world and the sacred that is within this world. So even for pagans who do believe in like a spiritual other world, this divide between kind of the sacred and the profane, or the material and the immaterial, is a lot less harsh. As a scientific pantheist, I don't believe in any kind of spiritual other world that's separate from the material world. I think the material world in itself is sacred. So paganism is really kind of a good fit for me in that sense. And I think that witchcraft really exemplifies this idea as well, this idea that there is magic in this world. For me, over the past few years, I've really come to recognize just how powerful the material world is, and just how much of an effect material environments and objects and things can really have on us. So things can really influence how we think, how we feel, how we behave. They can play a role in shaping our relationships to other people, to places, to ideas. Things are important. Things contain memories, they can evoke emotions. And I think it's really important to realize that as humans, we don't exist in any kind of vacuum. We are co-created with the other. And whether that other is other people, whether it's non-human beings, or whether it's objects, we are kind of entangled in this mesh of being with all these different things. And they are constantly playing a role in shaping us and who we are. Essentially, I'm trying to say that matter matters, and it matters what you decorate your sacred space with, because that can have a really profound influence on you. So, what then makes an effective altar? One of the main things that I think makes a really good altar is that it can help you shift in consciousness while you're using it. So especially if you use your altar for ritual and spell work, shifting from ordinary kind of everyday consciousness into a more kind of magical or sacred kind of consciousness is a really important part of that. The altar itself is a really important tool for kind of changing that mindset, for getting us into that magical mindset, for getting us ready to do spell work, to do ritual. Symbolism is a really, really important part of this, because symbols resonate with the unconscious mind, and they can act as really powerful cues for getting us to move into that magical mindset. Another thing that I think makes a really effective altar is its ability to engage the body and the senses, and to kind of bring us into a more embodied way of perceiving and being in the world. So again, embodiment and engaging the senses can also help us move into that kind of magical mindset and move us out of ordinary states of being into more magical, ritualistic kind of states. This shift in consciousness can help us move out of the kind of intellectual reason parts of the mind and into different, more embodied ways of knowing. So kind of more intuitive and emotional ways of being and knowing. So having elements on your altar that engage all of your different senses can really help with shifting this mindset in this way. So you might want to have like incense burning, scented candles, things like that, as well as oddly shaped crystals, for example. Like I really love touching weirdly shaped crystals while I'm at the altar, because it engages that sense of touch for me. Another thing that can make altars really effective is that they evoke emotions. So if you're choosing things to put on your altar that are really symbolically meaningful for you, that have a significant emotional attachment, then that may make your altar more effective. An effective altar is also one that is generally aesthetically pleasing. So I don't mean making your altar like Instagram perfect or anything like that. As long as it's pleasing to you, as long as you really enjoy looking at it and find it beautiful, then that's going to really help. Again, Magliocco calls altars a form of ephemeral art. So the altar itself is really a form of art, and it's kind of an artistic process creating and setting up the altar. Finally, another thing that's going to help you make your altar really effective is if it is personally meaningful to you. So for me, this means going beyond that like traditional Wiccan model to really incorporate things that are more meaningful to me and to my spiritual practice and to my beliefs. So with that, I just wanted to give you guys a few suggestions for ideas for things that you can incorporate into your altar that really go beyond kind of the traditional things that are generally seen on altars. But before we get into that, I'm just gonna start changing up this altar a little bit, take some things off, move some things around, and yeah, just kind of update it a little because it's been the same for like a couple months now, and I just feel like it's getting a little stale, so needs a change. So this altar reconstructing is pretty much done. I have kind of changed some things around. There are some things that I definitely left the same. Some things kind of stay the same on my altar all year round. Some things I switch up. And yeah, I tried to like kind of minimize it a little bit this time, taking some things off so that Freya won't be able to get to them and lose them because she tends to bat things off of the altar and then just run away with them and they'll never be seen again. So trying to kind of minimize that a bit. So now I just have like a few ideas that I just want to throw at you guys for things that you can include on your altar to just make it more personal for you and more effective for you. So one thing that's really great to include on your altar is representations of numbers that are meaningful to you. So even if you're not into like numerology or whatever yourself, numbers can still be really powerful symbols and they can hold a lot of meaning. So you can show numbers on your altar by grouping things together in certain numbered groups or having a certain number of something on your altar. For me, for example, 2s and 3s are really important in my spiritual practice. So I tend to have representations of 2s and 3s. So like I have 2 main kind of candles on either side of my altar. And these are my dualism candles, I guess. Like I work with the number 2 because of the dualism that it suggests. As human beings, we are just kind of really attracted to dualism. We like separating things into these neat binaries, right? So like male-female binary, black and white, sun and moon, god and goddess. You know, there's a whole bunch of binaries that we just kind of bring into our lives. We tend to think in binaries a lot. So I kind of have these on my altar to represent that. But then the fact that they're part of a whole altar kind of complicates that and shows that, you know, opposites are always part of the same whole and things are not really as binary and as dualistic as we think they are. So while I work with binaries, I work with them in order to challenge them, and these 2 candles kind of represent that for me. Another suggestion for things to include on your altar is just things gathered from nature. This one might be really obvious if you've had an altar for a while or like are a pagan or a witch. We're constantly collecting like pine cones and rocks and shiny things outside. This is a pretty common thing to include on an altar, but it's one thing that I find is really important because it does really materialize that connection with nature. So these things can be tangible representations of place and your kind of connection and relationship with those places. Another thing you might want to include on your altar is representations of your loved ones. So this might be like photographs of them or things that remind you of them. These are going to be tangible representations of these relationships, a kind of material manifestation of these relationships, and will hopefully remind you of that person when you look at them, when you work with them. I think witchcraft is largely about like relationships and understanding your relationship to the world, to various aspects of it, to various people. And this can be kind of an important part of it. So I have pictures of pets that have passed away because they're basically like family. They are family to me. So I have pictures of them on my altar. I also have representations of people, so animals that I associate with these people. I have like a turtle for my dad because he used to collect turtles as a kid. I have owls to represent my mom and my grandma because there's just important symbolism there for all of us. And then I also have gifts that people have given me on my altar as kind of a representation of them. So along with that, you might also want to have representations of particular times in your life or particular events that were really meaningful to you. So things that kind of remind you of these periods in your life that, you know, maybe you were particularly happy, or maybe you were going through an especially powerful period of spiritual growth and development, because again, things really do carry memories with them. So for example, if you went to like a life-changing concert and you still have the wristband from that, you could include that on your altar. Or you maybe want to include something that you had in the hospital with you when you had your first child or something. Something along any of those lines. I actually have a whole box of memories on my altar. So I've had this on my altar forever, and it just really has like a bunch of things that I've kept from either important events in my life, things that people have given me again, and they might be like the most silly little like mundane things, but they remind me of really important things that happened to me or people that have been really important in my life. So I think having like a box like this or some kind of container that you keep things in is really great, especially if you have like a lot of these kind of random trinkets and little bits from whatever in your life, and you want to keep them on your altar but don't necessarily want them kind of cluttering up the altar itself. Something else you might want to include on your altar would be like toys or items that you have from your childhood. So this can help remind you of your inner child, or remind you of your past, or remind you of something from your childhood. Also, I think that keeping things like toys on your altar is really cool because it's a good reminder that witchcraft doesn't have to be serious all the time. Witchcraft can be really playful and really fun and really imaginative too. So I think it's great to have these reminders of one's inner child, or whatever you want to call it, just to remind yourself that there can be a lot of fun in the craft and in spirituality. It can be playful. So I keep these near my altar often. These Swank Kids sunglasses that I had from when I was like, I don't know, very tiny. They're very small. I think I used to think I was pretty cool wearing them. So I keep these near my altar because it does remind me of kind of my childhood and yeah, the inner child. Something else you could include on your altar is references to pop culture. So like if a book, a movie, a TV show, or whatever had a particularly important impact on you, you could include some representation of that. And I mean, like, who cares if it's not traditionally witchy to include pop culture things on your altar? Like, who cares if it doesn't fit that witchy aesthetic? We live in a world that is so saturated by pop culture. Like, of course we're going to be influenced by that. So why not incorporate that into your magic, into your witchcraft, into your spiritual practice? Things like David Bowie and Pink Floyd and even Hermione Granger, they are fundamentally spiritual things for me, and they are important parts of my practice and important parts of who I am. Another thing that you can include on your altar is representations of things that you want to manifest in your life, things that you want to bring forth, goals that you are working towards. An altar can be a really great daily reminder of the focus of your goals. So for example, if you want to save up money to buy a car, you could keep a little toy car on your altar in order to represent that. You could also have an entire altar that's just dedicated to manifesting your goals and to working towards those goals. So for example, if you want a new job, you could have a whole altar dedicated to that. So for example, you could include like your resume on it, pictures of where it is you want to work. You could include like the earrings that you're going to wear to interviews on it, just things like that. Anything that has to do with getting this new job, you can have on that altar. Another thing that I've kind of started doing recently with my altars is to include mundane things on it that I want to make sacred. So things that are completely pedestrian, completely like have no real magical meaning or whatever, I like to include those on my altar sometimes so that I can make them magical and kind of make them important and add that extra layer of meaning to them in some way. So for example, I have started to include my supplements on my altar. This is just like my B12 supplement and then another supplement that I take, because putting them on my altar makes them a little bit more magical. And when I sit down at my altar in the morning or throughout the day, I can take these pills and kind of make them into a ritual in a sense. So even though they're completely like mundane things that, you know, I just have to take to keep my body working, I can make that into a more ritualistic kind of act and infuse them with meaning, like say something like, I am nourishing myself with this, or I am making myself strong and full of vitality by taking these. This has been especially helpful for me because I often forget to take my pills. I am really bad at taking these supplements, so having them on my altar really helps me with that. But anyway, the point is you can just make things that are completely pedestrian, normal, mundane, everyday, you can make them magical by putting them on your altar. You like the new altar? There's less for you to knock down now. Less for you to get into. Hey, less for you to eat. Alright, so that's pretty much what I have for this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And I would love to know, if you have an altar, what are some of the things that you keep on it? Especially things that maybe aren't as traditional or that don't really necessarily fit into the typical witchcraft, Wiccan kind of altar. So yeah, thanks again and have a wonderful, magical day. Bye.